In this episode, I'll begin my review and reaction to the 2005 movie Two for the Money. So let's dive right into Two for the Money. I thought this was a very weird movie and not at all, well, it was sort of what I was expecting going in, but I didn't think that it would take some of the twists and turns that it did. And, we do have Al Pacino, we do have Matthew McConaughey, we do have Rene Russo in this movie. And usually I'm a big fan of Al Pacino movies, and the stuff I've seen McConaughey in only a couple movies, I believe. Even True Detective season one was amazing with McConaughey, but this I felt like didn't really live up to expectations for me personally. I thought it was a finely passable movie in my opinion, but it wasn't something I'm gonna ever watch again in my life or really recommend people to watch. And the whole idea of this movie for me going into it of it being interesting was this idea of a sports gambling movie. And sports gambling is taking over the world. There's some good videos out there right now about how everything's just turning into sports gambling. I forget, I did watch a video from a guy talking about, now Robinhood app has betting stuff. You can bank on, or you can bet on like banking apps and all that crazy stuff. So it is interesting to see this side of sports gambling, where sports gambling was not very legal until the late 2019s and late early 2020s. It was always kind of legal in Vegas, but it was kind of a hush hush thing, and you had to call somebody. So from that perspective, it is interesting to take a look at what the sports gambling scene was like. And this story is inspired by one Stu Feiner, which is a big part of this movie that people like to go back and talk about. Obviously, if you don't know who Stu Feiner is, he's one of the well-renowned gamblers of sports and one of the OGs of sports gambling, and having this program, and that's what the movie gets into. Which I like Stu, but it didn't feel like Stu really. I don't know. I don't know how you can emulate Stu, but I don't know. I don't absorb too much Stu Feiner content, so I can't say for sure. But this felt like a weird story to tell, and I thought some parts were standing out as especially cool, and then most of the stuff we could have just skipped, and some of the subplots I thought were pretty odd in this one. Let's get into this one, giving my thoughts and reactions throughout the movie. So we start this one off. It is inspired by a true story, as I just said, based around the life of Al Pacino, and I believe the character that Matthew McConaughey is playing does also exist. And he has the fake persona name versus his real name. So I think I meant to look up what happened to that person after their story kind of ended here, but I'm not sure what happened with that person's life. Are they famous now? Whatever happened. But this is inspired by a true story, so can't hate on the plot details too much, which we'll see when as we go along here. I don't know if how much of this actually happened, but essentially we start off with Matthew McConaughey's character, and he is a quarterback for a college. I believe it's a college football team. I might be a professional team. I think he might have just gone to the professional league, or he had just was playing his last year in college, last game in college, and okay, it was college. So all of a sudden, he quits college sports. Well, growing up, we see he loved sports growing up, and so did his dad. But his dad had left before his 10th birthday, telling him he wasn't going to be great, and seemingly he was a great college athlete, which was a weird kind of wrinkle to the story of like maybe a motivation for the Brandon Lang character to be better was his dad, but it just felt pretty shallow where they just throw that at you right off the rip, and that's kind of all you get for the rest of the movie. Is that's his inspiration to just bet on sports and know sports and be able to handicap sports pretty well. So I thought that was kind of a weird storyline of his dad. Well, maybe it's like the character who's supposed to be Stu Feiner is a like dad figure. Walter Abrams is like a dad figure to him. I guess that might be a thing that I don't know. Some of this plot stuff was pretty confusing to me. Anyways, we see him growing up, loving sports. Dad leaves. He's still a college star, but his leg gets twisted, and that reminded me of the Kevin Ware injury. Almost out of the bone. Disgusting. I don't like those type of injuries. So Brandon Lang, if you actually got hurt like that, I'm sorry. Hope you got paid out, got insurance for that. And we finally, well, not finally, we get into the real meat and bones of the movie when Brandon Lang's gonna start handicapping, and all of a sudden he gets hot. Everyone remembers where they were for Big Cat's big college basketball streak last year. When somebody's hot, you tail them. And so Brandon Lang has been doing pretty well as a bettor, and he is now catching the attention of Walter Abrams, who's this guy in New York. I believe Brandon Lang was in on the West Coast somewhere, so he kind of gets up and leaves his life to go to New York and lives this kind of whole different lifestyle under the direction of Abrams, where Abrams lives like this gambling lifestyle and really promotes his stuff. Has his own TV show, this which I believe is now the bar or believe is the Sports Advisors. I could be wrong on that, but he had a cable show like 30 minutes before it was even popular to do that. So I don't know how people were really betting. It must have been mostly underground because this movie came out in 2005. So yeah, maybe it's just like you bet through Vegas, or I believe people had bookies and stuff like that. Very different scene from what we have today of DraftKings and your local sports books and those type of people having the reins on it. It was just kind of these people, you hit them up and say, hey, I'm taking this tonight. We've seen that in kind of a movie like Uncut Gems and whatever. So to vet Brandon Lang as his newest addition to the team, he sends him to a person. I believe it's a nail thing, a pedicure, and it's actually his wife is the person giving the pedicure. So he has the wife vet the people while talking to them through like a pedicure, which I respected that as like a you wouldn't initially know, and then that's a good way to get to know somebody. I guess I don't know if a lot of guys get pedicures, but if Walter Abrams is telling you to get one, you got to. Yeah, that was interesting. I like that kind of vetting him through that, and yeah, we get shades of Stu throughout the movie here, where he is um, this like bigger gentleman giving his picks to everybody, and then Stu is like, "Nah, it's terrible," and kicks him off the show. And is like, "We got to win," and whatever. Interesting stuff. As the movie progresses, he gets more and more popular, starts winning a lot of money, and then it's kind of like a plateau. He gets to the top, and then all of a sudden, and starts going downhill. But when he's rising to the top, he sends money back home to his family, which is like supposed to be a humbling scene of his mom saying, "You sent too much money," and then hangs up on him when they're calling. So I guess that was kind of like the "you're losing touch with reality" scene that we were supposed to get. And I don't know, it never felt like the Brandon Lang character was like bad. Like it didn't seem like, yeah, he's wrapped up in all this stuff, but it seemed like this was genuinely working out for him, where he became, one of the better known advisors, if you will, and was just winning money for people, making money for himself. Lifestyle was improving, but no, he's not humble enough because he's sending too much money home. It's like, what are we doing here? I thought that was a weird sequence with the mom, and he is also in the improvements of his life. He found a girl that he really likes to talk to, and turns out, she was a paid prostitute. So the hits keep coming. He lost his family life. Really doesn't got up and moved out everything. The girl he thought it was his girl was actually a prostitute, just placed by Abrams. So it seemed like this kind of makes me question a little bit about if you're like a Stu fan, was Stu actually doing all this stuff, hiring a prostitute, making her fake to be his girlfriend, and like kind of controlling different aspects of his life. Kind of a weird story just to tell overall, as I've been kind of spewing on here, but yeah, so that was one of the thing, and he's getting all these clients, bigger and bigger money clients. There's like this big client who lives abroad, and so of course once he's at that top, you can't win in sports gambling. If you know anything about sports gambling, a little bit of a sports gambler myself, there's really no winning. It's all going to come crashing down at some point. So once you get off your picks and they start missing, you start trying throwing stuff at the wall, trying different stuff, and it's not a good recipe for success. And so our guy Brandon Lang is driving through or biking through this park, and he gets body checked off the bike, and because his picks are losing. Imagine that. You give picks. I give picks in this channel sometimes. Imagine if somebody was like, "Hey, I took all your picks and you lost," and I'm just biking around and body check it. I'd be scared. I wouldn't give picks anymore. Um, yeah, once you get body checked off your bike, I feel like you kind of just lose morale overall and just don't want to bet anymore. Not only that, he gets body checked off the bike, held at gunpoint, and not only that, he gets pissed on by a guy. I'm all set with that. I'd be done. I'd just move back to LA and be like, listen, these clients are too big. I'm just gonna, bet my own picks and that's it. Well, I guess the whole thing is you're not supposed to really bet your own picks, but they do it. They just sit and watch in the TV room, and they just have like 7 TVs in the game. But I'd be upset after that. And this is kind of like the third act is him like his downfall, where he just can't hit a pick from. He can't throw a ball into the like whatever that saying is. You can't hit a side of the barn. I forget what the saying is, but he can't hit any pick, and he just keeps losing and losing and losing. Seemingly progressing with the NFL season as you get to the championships games. Both his picks whiff for that, and his big play is the Super Bowl play. Um, and well, actually, going back to the championship game, he has an all-time bad beat on a meaningless hail mary to for that team to cover and for the under to miss or something. I think with the he had the under and a certain team to cover, and then with that hail mary, it went over and the other team covered. So if he just double pick on that one was horrible. And then lastly, he finally hits the big play for the Super Bowl, I believe. I don't even remember what happened at the end, and he somehow solved all of Walter's issues. So Walter had been having a lot of issues with his wife, trust issues. There's like a ploy set up where this third act kind of just lost me throughout it, where there's a ploy set up where he's going to go with the wife into the house, seemingly looking like she's going to have an affair with him. But no, he just walked out the back door just to tweak out Walter because Walter's watching them the whole time. So Brandon just figured that out for them and was like, hey, I did this on purpose and you can do that. So go for it. And then he dips the scene after his big last play. And he got the people money back, no people on his back. Maybe that was kind of the whole point of it. And then after that, he's all set with this. He's going to coach Pee Wee football. Good ending for him. But I don't know. It's kind of a weird ride to get there. I get the overall theme of you can't win in gambling. You have to keep trying and trying. Like once you hit bit, like he got out at the right time and probably made the best decision for himself. Which now going back to my earlier point on what happened to Brandon Lang, I guess he just coached Pee Wee football. Obviously, Stu Feiner has continued on in his life. He's still gambling today. Still does the sports advisors today. So I don't know. I thought this was a weird kind of story to tell. The initial aspect of the sports gambling drew me in, and there were some cool scenes with that stuff going on. This wasn't the worst movie in the world. It wasn't necessarily boring. I just thought some of the choices were odd. The music was pretty cheesy, in my opinion, as well. So I'm going to land this movie at a 6.5. I wouldn't really recommend it to anyone if you're like a sports bettor and you're curious to see a movie about it. Watch Uncut Gems. You don't need to watch this, but it was okay. It wasn't the worst movie in the world, but I wouldn't really recommend this to anybody. 6.5 for Two for the Money. So am I too low on it? What would you guys rate it? Would you rate it a little bit higher? Let's compare this movie to the other movies reviewed so far on the channel. So this is the 95th movie reviewed so far, and this comes in at number 81 of those 95 movies, so not on the upper echelon of the DubCast movies so far. This does tie the movie Fracture, and comparing those two, I would take Fracture over this one slightly. I thought Fracture was slightly more entertaining. Obviously, both 6.5s out of 10, so equal scales there. Comparing some actor stuff, so we had Al Pacino in this movie and in Devil's Advocate. I like Devil's Advocate much better. I gave that an 8.3. This is now the worst Al Pacino movie. Matthew McConaughey was in Deadpool and Wolverine and The Gentleman. Both of those movies I gave a 7.8. This is a 6.5. So now the new worst Matthew McConaughey movie. This falls behind Nightcrawler, which was an 8.3. Rene Russo in both those movies. American Gangster 8.1. Armand Assante in both those movies. And then we had one other sports drama that we reviewed, which was F1. I gave that an 8.0. Unfortunately, this is the worst sports drama as well. So not the biggest fan of Two for the Money, but it was worth a watch just to well, it wasn't worth the watch, but it was an interesting one for sure. So Netflix too. So I think there were enough positives that you could say it's. I'm not upset I watched it. I guess I don't know. Anyways, that's what we'll leave it on for Two for the Money. So what do you guys think of this one? Let me know down below in the comments. Is this one of the greatest sports dramas of all time? Not in my opinion, but maybe there are people out there who really like this movie and like Stu Feiner, so they like this kind of story about him. But feel free to let me know. And coming up on the DubCast, we got a lot of stuff coming up. Big channel updates, as always. So next movie reviews, we have Wall Street and then Fantastic Mr. Fox. Besides that, expect Survivor 50 weekly coverage after every episode. I'm going to try and get those out the night of the episode, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Big season. Love season 50 so far. And besides that, more sports content will be coming back into form soon. We'll have UFC stuff every numbered event. We cover those. And then NBA, the playoffs are back. And everyone knows I love the NBA, so we'll be covering that as well. So that's where I'll leave y'all with this one. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, dislike. Stay tuned on social media. I'm trying to post a little more here and there on social media. So as always, be easy, y'all.